Day 291 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. And as always, I'll start off with those Russian military losses, so as of the 11th of December 2022. So in the last 24-hour reporting period, there's been an additional 380 Russian military personnel losses, so currently sitting on approximately 94,140. Then we'll take a quick look at the hardware losses there for the Russian side. So armored combat vehicles, tanks and artillery, 3, 2 and 1 loss there, all respectively. Then we'll jump back across to the map and we'll start out in Crimea, where there is certainly a bit of map related news in the Russian occupied peninsula in the last 24 hours alone, where there has been multiple explosions as a result of Ukrainian strikes in the region. And up first is the location of Sobyansky, where there was a Ukrainian strike causing a fire at a Russian military base overnight. So let's zoom into there, so around this location here. Now, the Russian occupying authorities said that the air defenses have been working successfully, but no, they were not. And also, there were explosions at the Sevastopol airport, so really close to the west side of the peninsula, but also explosions as well at the airport at Simferopol, so a little bit into the middle of the peninsula there as well. Now, what we generally have going on here is Ukraine using some of their much lesser advertised long-range strike capabilities in terms of their weapon systems, which could have been a combination of long-range drones and maybe even some sea-based platforms as well, but time will certainly tell what's happened here. But in the end, it's been some military strikes at Russian-occupied locations there, exactly what Ukraine, the AFU has set out to do, obviously. Then we'll take a look at the Donbass, so in the north at Novoselivka, where it's been some really tough times and really intense times at this location. So we'll zoom in, and here we have it there. So taking a look at the date map over the past 2 weeks or so, you'll notice that there has been a lot of back and forth at this location there. So yeah, move back to where it is at now. In the last 24-hour reporting period, Russia has taken back some land there. And the reason for this whole rigmarole is it's just the next location on the highway for the AFU to get to and to liberate the larger location of Svatova there. So both sides really want to maintain some level of control of the connecting highway and the main P66 highway realistically. So that's really what's happening there. Oh, and then taking a little bit more of an inland look, so to speak. Not exactly map related per se, but we're talking about the Luhansk hospital right here, where it looks like the main war injury for Russian troops in this region that they're now experiencing is, drumroll, frostbite. Yep, you guessed it. So basically the freezing of peripherals or your extremities such as hands, fingers, feet, toes, those sorts of things. So over the past 3 days alone, more than 400 Russian soldier patients were brought in from the combat zones, from the front lines for this specific injury, or maybe for this specific Russian wartime injury. And it's odd and potentially a little bit funny, the timing, for the fact that purely it's just that we're not even close enough to the dead of winter conditions yet. So things are only going to get a lot worse in the upcoming, say, end of December, middle of January, maybe even end of January there as well. Then a little bit further down in the Donbass, so we'll take a look at Bakhmut, where the defenders in Bakhmut are sometimes being assaulted from 3+ different directions at the exact same time. Now, they do have heavily fortified positions, so even though the fighting is intense here, and Russia is really trying to step up their game, militarily speaking, it still doesn't look like Russia has what it takes to take this town this week or next, or as it gets colder for the remainder of the winter. Very, very soon they'll be locked out, so to speak. And conversely speaking, Russian forces are having a lot of their own troops liquidated as they continue to not capture the town still as well. Then we'll move across to the south a little bit there today. So you might remember the heavily frontline contested town of Pavlivka. So here it is there, and the adjacent Volodar as well, where the battles continue in and around Pavlivka specifically. So Russian naval infantry units continue to take losses mainly from a large portion of artillery strikes at this location. So we're talking about Russian soldiers, or really Marines here, if you want to call them that. Probably better terminology. Although I do bet the Russian kitchen cook sailor was used, in fact, for cannon fodder at this location as well. And I'm only half joking about that. Certainly plausible. Oh, and also nearby, the armed forces of Ukraine reinforced some positions at Mariinka, so right along here, a little bit north of where I was a moment ago, in fact. And it's been a heavily tested location, in fact, causing some Russian forces to pull out just because they were taking so much Ukrainian artillery fire as well in the last day or two. Somewhat similar to Pavlivka in a way, except the only major difference here is that some Russian troops did have the sense to pull back, which they're technically not legally allowed to do, but maybe they found the opportunity and took it. Oh, and also here's just a quick pic of paratroopers of the 79th Brigade that destroyed and occupied a Russian tank near Mariinka as well. Then we'll move across to the Zaporizhia Oblast today. So quite a bit of big news here. So there's been some massive Ukrainian strikes at Melitopol, so the city right there, in the last day. So about 10 or so explosions were reported so far. And the Ukrainian strikes hit a Russian barracks, with early reports of really such a wide array of Russian losses. So maybe 200 to 300 Russian troop losses alone, and roughly that amount as well in wounded too. Now, I've seen the ground footage, and to be honest, it's not pretty. It's nighttime footage from a Russian troop's cell phone of fires and devastation and destruction everywhere for the Russian occupied military barracks. And it's really serious stuff. So I'm not going to make too much of a joke about this one, because it's moments like these and really Russian targeted stories like these that will scare the living daylights out of the wider Russian army when they hear these stories. In fact, most Russian troops don't like being anywhere near Melitopol or the larger Zaporizhia for a whole flurry of reasons, such as the Ukrainian partisans in the location, or certainly because Melitopol and much of Zaporizhia is really within Ukrainian precision strikes, like the HIMARS strikes, Excalibur strikes, all of those sorts of things there. So there's really a lot of, I might call, fearful psychological scarring that reverberates throughout the entire Russian military for this general oblast of a location. They are not fond of it. Then we'll move across on the map, and today we'll take a look at, so here's a photo here of the M14 highway between Mykolaiv and Kherson City has got some repairs, so that's always good to see. And I really doubt, for instance, Russia is doing road repairs anywhere to the same level or extent that Ukraine is doing them. And Ukraine, of which has actually become quite efficient at doing it too. Exceedingly efficient. Then some other big news today. So at the adjacent Ukrainian city of Odessa, a large flurry of Russian drone strikes hit the power grid there. So lots and lots of drones were in fact sent. 10 were shot down, but a whole bunch more seemed to get through. I don't have the exact numbers there. But Zelensky, in a video address, urged patience in this region because the grid took such a unexpected direct hit, which isn't normally the case for these drones, these Iranian-based drones that Russia uses, that he did say it will take a few days as opposed to a few hours to get the power up and going again. And then we'll move across to some news today. So in some somewhat related news, Latvia has provided some high-powered electrical generators. And also, Norway has allocated $100 million in funds to help restore Ukrainians' damaged infrastructure as well, like this one at Odessa today. And on top of that, Estonia has sent a whopping 11 buses worth of generators, so the smaller type of generators, single home use, that kind of thing, and other various energy equipment for Ukraine too. So yeah, good day of news just in terms of the international community coming out in support of Ukraine, standing up in solidarity, really just against Russia's aggression and assisting with Ukraine's power needs. Then in some other interesting news, so an additional NASAMS air defense system has arrived in Ukraine. So this is some really high-tech, really modern, for instance, NATO-style air defense systems. In fact, this is a joint venture between a Norwegian company and a US company there. So I think this one's actually unexpected, the fact that it came. They weren't meant to get existing stock, but this one looks like existing stock that came from another location, another country, for instance. And it seems Ukraine now has 3 out of the 8 that have been pledged to them. So just previous to now, they only had 2. So the more the better, absolutely. Always good to see. Then in a quick mobilization blunder for today, a Russian mobilization blunder. This is no real images. I'll try to throw something up there for you guys, but bit of a quick story. So Russia detained 10,000 men recently for the purposes of mobilization. I thought Russia's mobilization was over too, but no, it's never over. Anyway, in this instance, it was really, really dodgy or untoward the way that it was performed. So it was performed by police officers and other mobilization officers who in fact removed their identification badges and literally pulled young men off the streets. And we only know about this because Russia's independent human rights group just mentioned it as they're trying to use legal means within Russia to help these young men. But that's not going to help in Russia. It doesn't matter. And I bet they've already been shipped off to the Donbass front lines, for instance, because sad but true story, nothing's been heard of these 10,000 young men since. How sad is that? That's just a crazy sad story. Generally, these guys would have been contributing members to society in the long term. I mean, they're all young. So all I can say is gee. Then in a bit of a quick lighter-hearted funny to round it off with today. So the Great Household Appliance War. So yet another toilet taken right off its pipes, found in the recently liberated Kherson region, but was left behind by Russian forces due to their fairly immediate retreat that occurred about on this day last month, in fact. So exactly a month ago. So the all-time lows continue with this Russian army. They really did come to loot. So they were expecting more looting and less fighting, but instead they got less looting and more fighting. So thanks for watching, guys. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button, and I do definitely hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.